This is the KnightShift podcast, powered by Black and Gold Banneret, your home for news and analysis from all UCF Knight sports. The KnightShift starts now.
And we welcome you to this special edition of KnightShift. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Bryson Turner. Coming up, we will preview the 2024 UCF volleyball season as it'll be year two in the Jenny Maurer era. Coming up, you'll hear from Jenny Maurer, and as begins her second year, what to expect from the Knights in year two of the Big 12. We'll also hear from Scheer as well as Emily Wilson of there. So they'll talk about the year two. Of course, we won't see the Knights in person, at least for a while, as we'll break down a unique schedule. The Knights will be on the road a lot in the non-conference before they get going to the Big 12, and then we'll discuss some of the storylines within the Big 12, a Big 12 without Texas, but has added Arizona State, Colorado, and as well. Bryson should be unique here in year two.
Yes, indeed. I think this will be a team that has a good amount of continuity, because last year we were have that question of, this is the first year post McKenna Melville. How's this team going to look? Who's going to have to at least fill in McKenna's shoes in a sense, because she really racked up a lot of kills during her time at UCF. And so how do you redistribute those kills around to everybody else? And of course you had a brand new setter, because Amber Olsen retired, and you know how important a setter can be for a volleyball team. So last year was a year, I would say, that was a UCF team that was finding its footing with a bit of a new makeup. And sure, there are a couple of players that you'll need to replace on this year's squad, but I think I would say that the turnover is less going from last season to this season than from 2022 to 2023.
No doubt about that. Of course, let's hear from head coach Jenny Maurer. In year two, of course, she was a longtime assistant under Todd Dagenet, took over late last year in April with this program. She'll talk about what she learned in from year one to year two, as well as this nucleus of a team as they get set for the 2024 season. Here now is head coach Jenny Maurer on KnightShift.
Hi, everybody. We are so excited to get started this year. Our team is all reported, and I think the biggest thing that they're looking forward to this season is to not be the new kids on the block, right? Heading into last year, everybody was discounting us, thinking that we were just going to limp our way into the Big 12. And I think we started off with a bang, starting off 7-0 in conference after coming off a 10-2 preseason record. And so I think we got some momentum rolling for us. And it was as expected for us. You know, we have a culture of winning. And so we were ready to go and ready to prove everybody wrong at that point. And we hit some bumps in the middle of the season last year. And I think, it's a grueling 5 months. And to face your top 25 teams day in and day out in that second half was no easy mix. And so for us, I think we knew what to expect, but you still have to go through it. And I think we learned a lot. And the resounding themes that I heard this year is they're focused, they're ready to earn everything. And doesn't matter whether we're ranked 1st, 15th, 11th is where they put us this year. For us, it's about the people in the room and being able to earn everything they get.
Coach, what has it been like to the impact on the people in the room? Because you've had the Orlando Valkyries now in town for a little while, and obviously with professional volleyball in the U.S. being what has it been like to kind of have that atmosphere for your team over the course of these past several months of this year?
Sure. The energy was electric, in addition financial, and it was great for our players to be able to see that, especially having one of our own Knights in their uniform in Abby Hansen. And so for us, there was a deep connection there, and it's great for our young women to have something to aspire to. Sure, they've always aspired to play overseas, and we have some currently playing overseas as well, but to have it right here on your campus, I think it just really hits close to home. And now we have some of our current athletes having those aspirations especially those that don't want to go overseas.
Coach, what's the biggest thing you learned about your team throughout year one in the Big 12?
Well, on one hand, we kind of already knew that we had a lot of grit, but to really see us produce in the Big 12, I think it was, and play and compete against anybody. You know, we kind of got hit that losing streak rut, and then you're facing the defending national champs. And to play like we did, even if we didn't come out with a W, to see that grit and that heart, that competitiveness, even at the end of the season, we were playing for something on the very last day in that match against Kansas on the road, which was no easy task. They're a Sweet 16 team. And I think on one hand, I kind of knew that, but to see us be able to produce, I knew we had the guts inside of ourselves to go after it, but to be able to do it and compete with the best of the best, I think we proved a lot to ourselves that we could do this to carry into year two.
You're not the new kids on the block anymore, but the Big 12 does have a new look for the second year in a row. How will those teams being added kind of mix this thing up a little bit?
Well, you know, they're coming in from another Power Four conference, right, which no longer exists, but they're not going to be a walk in the park. We know not to take any single team for granted. And I don't think we did that last year either. I think, if anything, we proved that we can't be taken for granted either. And so that was mentioned already in our first team meeting, that we're not the new kids on the block. Now we're going to welcome them in, and they better be ready.
And to be picked 11th, that's the lower third. That's kind of stick a little bit and be motivated.
Sure it does, right? We know what it is as a program to be the targeted, but now whether you put yourself in that position to feel that pressure or not, it doesn't matter. You know, we're going to go in with a chip on our shoulder, because I think that's UCF in general. I think we as a university, as an athletics department, are used to being discounted, and we're still newish to, right, the big kids sandbox and in a power conference, right? And so for us, we're going to have the chip on our shoulder whether we're ranked, regardless of where we're ranked at this point. So for us, it's about trying to avoid that distraction and that noise, and just going in and earning it.
Now that you've had
the success in the American and the dominance in the American, is that disrespectful to be that low?
No, in the sense that, you know, we finished with a winning record, but we were still tied for 8th. We finished ahead of where we were predicted to finish last year. So for us, we're gunning for everything again this year. And so, yeah, I think that carries a little bit of chip on our shoulder, but for us, it's more about proving it to each other day in and day out.
Now that you have a season of Big 12 results to reflect on, what would you say your biggest response has been to the offseason now that you have some actual tangible, film, Big 12 film to look at as you now prepare for this season?
Yeah, we've already even discussed, it's one thing to know it, it's another to having been through it. Just the level of intensity and preparation day in and day out. You know, we were used to playing Power 5 and even beating Power 5 teams when there was a Power 5. But we did that for 4 weeks in the preseason, and we didn't have to do that all the way through the end of November. And so our preparation, I think, was as much physical as it was mental to be able to continue to recruit players that can grind that entire time.
You mentioned, obviously, Abby playing for the pro now. That'll be one of the big questions the volleyball will be asking all year about. Abby and Claudia up the middle. How did the middle look now this year with Abby and Claudia now graduating? Right.
Well, we added a transfer in Alexia Kuhl, who came from one of the newbies into our conference this year. So we're excited about having her knowledge of, being a buff for the last 5 years. And so she gives us a very different dynamic in her physicality and her height at 6'7". So we're super excited about having her in our program and just her level of knowledge as well as physicality. And then we had 2 red shirts, one of whom could play even on a pin for us in Sasha Cohen. So that'll be determined. We haven't started practice yet, but we had some tremendous growth in those 2 players during the spring season. And we'll see what they've been doing all summer, too, to figure out what's going to be the best product on the floor.
Coach, how close is this program right now to where you want it to be?
Oh, I'd say nowhere close. It's hard to peak for 5 months, right? We want to be peaking at the right time and heading into conference. So, during the preseason before even the pre-conference competition begins, we have a lot to figure out. It's kind of nice having 2 full weeks of classes, which that usually doesn't happen. We can kind of take our time to settle in after that first full week of double days and whatnot. And so for us, there's going to be a tremendous amount of learning that's happening, of figuring out what's going to be the best team and the best system of offense and defense for us. It's going to look very different, even if we're not adding a ton of new players or new faces. It could look very different than last year. And so we still have a lot to figure out.
You talked about the bump in the road last year. How have you seen your team respond to that this offseason?
Yeah, well, they've already been discussing what they learned during that time. I mentioned it a little bit earlier about being targeted. We didn't have the targets on our back this last year. And so we went on this tremendous winning streak and feeling that momentum, and then you lose a match and then you lose another match and then you start, inch by inch start questioning or start doubting yourself. It was unfamiliar territory for us. Even if they knew they had what it took, you're still facing some of the top competition in the United States. The Big 12 finished as the number 2 conference in terms of amount of teams that got into the NCAA tournament, and we went the furthest with the most teams, so number 1 in the conference. So there were no easy days, and I think there was a lot of learning taking place of settling down and stop doubting ourselves and then competing. And that's why I think we finished on a high. Even if the wins didn't come, we were playing those teams closer than some of the postseason teams in the tournament. So I think us recognizing what it feels like to be in that position, only one way is through it and experiencing it for yourselves, and I think we did that.
An example of that would be like Abby Schomer's setting as a freshman all year, and then like Emily Wilson and taking that next step. Speak of the growth of those 2 players and other players that you expect to see that growth pay off from last year.
Absolutely, they took on new roles. You had Abby Schomers, who had set for her high school team in a 5-1, and then spent a year understudying to Amber Olsen. And while she was learning and studying film and competing day in and day out, she knew that she was redshirting. And so then all of a sudden stepping into that role, that's no easy task. And then actually had sustained an injury right before the first conference match. So playing through that the entire season, and ending up with surgery on the after season, that was no easy mix. That was a mental grind. I commend her for the mental stability that she had to possess during that whole stretch, more than anything, as much as the physical that she put into. So she's stepping into a new role, and same thing with Emily Wilson stepping into, as we've said many a time, you don't replace a McKenna Melville, and we reminded her of that. She doesn't have to be, she needs to be the best Emily Wilson that she could be. And that's every player on our team Emily Wilson brings things to the table that McKenna didn't. And so we were pretty lethal behind the service line. We were nationally ranked behind the service line in big part to Emily Wilson last year. And so it was really bringing out the best and maximizing the strengths of the players that we had. And this year will be no different.
When it comes to the schedule, are you glad to get some of those road teams from a year ago here this time around?
Oh, absolutely. For sure. And same thing with the travel. It's with our conference spreading coast to coast, time zone to time zone. We're definitely excited for some of them to come our way and not have to go 3 time zones too much this year.
To get off to a good start, how important will that be for this group if you're going to be changing a lot of things and mixing stuff up?
Well, I think very critical, but also we have a different format than we did last year. We would go to play one opponent back-to-back days, win or lose. And now we'll have that day in between, which was more familiar to us for those who have been here and part of the American in the past, where you have a day to go to a somewhat close opponent to the next, Kansas State, Arizona State. So it's not like we're going back and forth time zones or anything like that. But regardless of what happens, you have to regroup and now prepare for a different opponent. So I think we can wrap our heads around more familiar territory from the past, and you get a chance to face a different opponent earlier in the season versus later in the season. And that's something that I think gives us an advantage, versus playing the same team, whether you have your own team available or not.
One other
Last question.
One other aspect of the schedule has been the travel mileage you'll log in during the preseason home openers until September 19th. Just tell us what it was like putting together this non-conference schedule, including that late one against Florida, and what do you think it will take for this team to kind of get off to a good start given so many road games to start off with?
Sure. This was definitely the most difficult scheduling that I've had to undergo as a coach in the past, and talking to some coaches who have 15, 20 years even on me, they said the same thing. And I think with the restructuring of conferences, especially them going coast to coast, why would we want to travel 3 time zones in the preseason if we're already going to have to be doing that during our conference? So I think it's definitely regionalizing or shortening that distance that we want to travel. But even though we're on the road, we're still in state, so the travel won't be nearly as grueling, but we're still going to have to play on somebody else's surface. And so for us, it was a very difficult task to get scheduling, because there's a lot of teams with that Big 12 patch on your shoulder. There's a lot of teams that just are going to run scared from you. So it was challenging from a sense of either teams don't want to play you, but you're also cutting off about half of the United States in your options because of wanting to limit that travel and the grind that, having to switch airports, having to, deal with elevation and whatnot, and then turn around and produce and jump at max capacity. So it was challenging, but we got it done. And, for us then, our team knows one of our biggest core values is always, or common threads, is being adaptable. You got to play. At the end of the day, you got to show up and play. And so we'll be ready for it.
All right, that was Jenny Maurer from the UCF Media Day that took place a little while there, Bryson. What's unique about this situation with Jenny? People forget. I think they just assume, well, she was on the staff, so it should have been a smooth transition. But remember, she took over late, right, in April. Of 2023.
Well, Todd Dagenet stepped down in April. It wasn't until May 18th that Jenny Maurer was appointed brought on as the new head coach, because that spring isn't usually a time when a program adds a new volleyball coach, Eric Lopez. So UCF really had to figure out what it was going to do. And then they tabbed Maurer, and then this was in the middle of spring, so Maurer had less time to really gain her bearings and assemble her staff and all the things that a normal head coach would do over the course of a normal offseason. She only had to do it in a couple, much less months. Plus, they had a trip to Europe that they had to go to right after she got hired, so she had that to worry about as well. So I think this offseason is huge, because this is, I would argue, the first full offseason that Coach Maurer is able to really take her time and assemble this team in a more traditional manner that a college volleyball coach would.
And has her staff complete. She added an assistant this year, so she's now got 3 assistants on the staff. So they're a year together. From that standpoint, I think helps. The players are more familiar with the staff as well. So I think there's that comfort there. Again, they won't make excuses. They got off to a great start last year, and then they hit up that gauntlet in the Big 12, hit them in the face in the second half of the year. One of the big questions, of course, this season, Bryce, it's going to be the middle blockers. Of course, we had Claudia Dillon last year and Abby Hansen. Both have graduated. Abby Hansen, you got to see up close play professionally. I think that's the big question. You heard me ask Jenny Maurer about the middle blockers. What'd you think of her answer and your thoughts on the middle blockers at UCF?
I think that she is very confident in who she has. I mean, for one, there are only 3 middle blockers on the roster. So you have 2 middle blockers on the court, and then there's 3 on the entire roster. That's Alexi Kuhl, a transfer from Colorado. Then you have a young redshirt freshman named Sasha Cohen, and then you have a redshirt sophomore Megan Holland, who redshirted last year after transferring in. So I think that what this tells me, considering that what coach went after in the transfer portal and what she ended up with, she seems pretty confident in the middle blockers that she has, especially the fact that, both Sasha and Megan redshirted last year, and one of them is going to have to, take the court for a solid amount of time, or maybe you rotate between both of them. Either way, I think that she's satisfied with what she has in terms of who you got to replace her, and they'll be led by a Colorado transfer in Alexia Kuhl, who has a lot of volleyball experience coming in. So I think the questions probably won't get answered until we see them on the court, just because that's how a complete turnover works in terms of like this, because we're going from 2 known quantities in Abby Hansen and Claudia Dillon to three players that UCF fans have not seen play in a UCF uniform before. But I think once we see them get out on the court, we'll get an idea of what kind of middle blocker position we're dealing with. The good news is that's the only position that's going through this kind of turnover on the roster.
Alexia Kuhl, 6'7", as you heard and Jenny mentioned in the presser there. Size. That's something that the coaching staff, they've been trying to recruit, is more size. That's one of the differences when you're in a power conference versus being in the American. And I don't think that's an accident with Alexia there coming in at 6'7" out of St. John's, Florida, transferred out of Colorado, as you mentioned.
You got to get big.
Got to get bigger for sure. So, that's going to be very interesting. It is a roster, by the way, as you mentioned, not a lot of turnover because it was a pretty young roster last year. And you look even at this year, certainly you have, I'm looking at it right now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seniors, right?
Well, there are four new additions to this squad, but what's this squad in terms of just adding? But yes, 5 graduate students or seniors are on this roster this time around. So there was a lot more experience on the way. I would say leading that group is Chloe Scheer, libero Chloe Scheer, and outside hitter Emily Wilson, Wilson's now in her second year as kind of the team's, I would say, primary kill target this time around. And after the progress we saw last season with her serve game, and honestly, the whole team had a really good serve game last season. I think another off season for Emily to really be able to work on her game. I'm very interested to see what kind of offensive attack we're going to get out of this team this time around, where now they're a lot more used to the just sending the ball to McKenna like 80% of the time.
Well, and a big part of the offense will be set up, of course, by the setter. And, of course, Abby Schomer's returns. Remember, it was a redshirt freshman a year ago, basically played the whole season. A little banged up, as we found out from Coach Maurer, was played injured a little bit at less than 100% towards conference season. But she returns, Bryson, as the redshirt sophomore and figures to be the leader from a setting position at the setter position in year 2.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, of course, she came to UCF from Omaha, Nebraska, a volleyball hotbed there. And I remember you telling me last year how Abby was one of the had one of the best seasons of a young setter that you've seen. I remember you were thoroughly impressed with her, and so now that she's had another off season to develop, I'm very interested to see what kind of player we're going to get out of her this time. Because because I was impressed with her too, and if we were impressed with her as a freshman, then I'm very intrigued to see what kind of Abby Schomers we're going to see coming into this season. Now that there's, I would say, less youth on this team, and now this team is getting more experienced, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah. I think there's great tradition at UCF volleyball, obviously with setting with Jenny Franks, UCF Athletic Hall of Famer, Emily Kaiser, certainly one of the best ever, the all-time leader and assist in UCF volleyball, certainly should be considered for the UCF Hall of Fame, kind of has been left out to this point. And then, of course, Amber Olsen is the one that Schomer's got to redshirt and watch in person and watch Amber Olsen do her thing. So she's got big shoes to fill. But she's not the only setter in the roster, Bryson. You heard Jenny Maurer mention she played kind of banged up last year, hurt. What is the depth behind her in the setters should something happen to Abby Schomer?
Well, because Abby was able to play through her injury last year, she ended up the other setters ended up not really getting a lot of playing time. There's Renee Rawls, who is a local product or hometown listed as Orlando. She's a junior this season, but she only played one set last year. That being said, she's been around for a while. I think that if there's anyone that if Abby ends up getting hurt and has to miss time, she would probably go with Renee first. But they just brought in this one of the two true freshmen that Coach Maurer brought into this is Maya Ball, coming from Angola, Indiana. She's actually the daughter of Loy Ball, who was the setter for the 2008 gold medal winning Team USA in men's volleyball. So we have a bit of a legacy volleyball setter coming into Orlando this year. And I mean, look, if Maya can impress Coach Maurer in the offseason, then I could see her getting some time. But considering how, Abby Schomer's redshirted her first year, Sasha Cohen and Megan Holland both redshirted in order to save their years of eligibility, I would not be shocked if Maya would redshirt as well, just to save those years of eligibility. Volleyball seems like a sport to me that is very redshirt friendly, I would say, because I've noticed that redshirt freshmen, unless you're like really, really good as a freshman, you usually redshirt is what I normally see. That being said, though, she's a legacy volleyball player, so you
never know, right? You never know. You could do different schemes. Sometimes if you decide you want to play two setters in an offense, you could do that, but we'll see. It's hard to tell. We'll know early in the season based on how the the rotations look. If it's going to be just the Abby Schomer show there, or do we see others maybe get some reps there? Bell's fascinating there. But you're right, she's a true freshman, especially in the Big 12. It's a big ask, perhaps. So maybe she redshirt, because remember, that would mean Schomer's would have 2 years left after this year, and then you still would have Bell for 4, so maybe that's how you do it. But who knows? You got to let it play out. You always got to play your best players there. Of course, part of the job of the setters is to set up some of their firepower. You mentioned one of them, Emily Wilson. When we come back on this edition of Night Shift, you'll hear from Emily Wilson as well as the vet of the team, Chloe Scheer, who has seen it all at UCF Volleyball. You'll hear from both of them. Plus, we'll break down the positions on the defensive side and the back row, as well as some of the other outside hitters for this season. And then look towards that schedule, which is very unique. That's all coming up following this. You're listening to Night Shift.
For all the latest news and analysis from every UCF sport, visit blackandgoldbanneret.com, your home for the UCF Knights on SB Nation. We bring you all the latest news and in-depth analysis from across Knight Nation, from football and hoops to golf and tennis. If you want to stay on top of all things UCF, visit blackandgoldbanneret.com, powered by SB Nation.
And welcome back here to Night Shift. Of course, as UCF embarks on this 2024 season, it'll be the last one for Chloe Scheer, who has seen it all, Bryson, in UCF volleyball, hasn't she?
Oh, yes, she has. She ended up, it's funny, she was actually working with the Orlando Valkyries on the back end side of things. So she's starting to gain some professional experience in the sport of volleyball. But now it's amazing, because I remember first covering her in 2021, and she was like, one of the underclassmen. And now here she is in her final year. She got to really experience a lot in the McKenna Melville era, and she ended up having quite some marks herself as well. She's already turned in enough digs to where she is among the top 10 in UCF history in career digs. I believe she's actually 9th ranked right now, just ahead of Erin Campbell, and is now chasing the likes of Emily Kaiser, Renata Menchikova, and Kia Bright. Considering how many digs that she has turned in over the course of her career to this point, and the types of seasons that we normally see out of her, where she gets maybe, I want to say like upper 300s area, I could see her potentially finishing her UCF career bubbling right in the 5th place. I could see that being a high ceiling for her. So she has a chance to, just like how McKenna Melville did a couple of years ago, really establish herself as part in the UCF's legacy with this season that she has. Of course, she's not the only libero defensive specialist on this team that has seen a lot of playing time, because her partner in crime, Caitlin Grimes, is also back for another season as well. I am quite impressed, actually, of how Chloe and Caitlin have been able to coexist with each other as liberos defensive specialists, and both getting a lot of time and still really contributing to this UCF team. Caitlin is definitely much more of I would say more of a server, like in the sense that she is more serving like specialist, I would say, because she has 30 aces. Chloe's great at aces too with 31. It's just that Chloe is, I would say, the digger of the two. And that's definitely something that UCF, I think, is going to need, because they finished last season 295th in the country in team digs and 306th in the country in digs per set. So they're definitely going to need Chloe, I think, to help kind of improve that if they want to compete in the Big 12. But this is one last ride for this dynamic duo that has been through a lot together at UCF, which Chloe kind of got into a bit more when we got a chance to speak with her and Emily Wilson at UCF Fall Sports Media Day.
Yeah, let's hear that. That was from Media Day. Chloe Scheer and Emily Wilson.
What does it feel like now going in knowing that, you got one more shot?
I think it's surreal. I don't think it hits you until later in the season. I know like seniors in past have said the same thing. But, I'm going to go into it like it was any other season. And then eventually once it hits senior night, I think then that's where it'll hit me, when it's like, okay, it's really over. But again, going in like it's any other season, with the same passion, same grit, same mentality.
What's it been like going into this season? Because you've been partnered up with your fellow libero defensive specialist, Caitlin Grimes, for quite a long time now. So what's it been like to kind of be on this journey with her, as not only just as teammates, but in that same position group?
Yeah, we compete every day. Like you said, we kind of came in together. I remember we were going to the summer camps when I committed here. And so we got to play together then, and then coming in and being with her basically for her whole career and my whole career has been great. I think we bring the best out of each other. We compete and practice every day, and there's always that grind. But at the end of the day, we have each other's backs. We're teammates, and we love each other.
Emily,
how do you feel today? You're a different player than you were, say, a year ago coming into your first team meeting.
Oh, I'm honestly just super excited. Being like a senior this year, I know Chloe feels the same way, but it's just all the work that you put in since a little kid is just all coming to an end right now, and it's just one last hurrah. So as a team, we're really excited to get started, and just celebrate the seniors and stuff, and it's the last hurrah, so we got to give it our all.
Emily, Coach talked about how one of the reasons your team was so highly regarded in terms of service was because of your development. Going from like one service save from your entire career to 46 last season, quite the jump. What about this offseason do you feel like that you've made progression in the same way that you had progressed with your serving the previous offseason?
I just feel like we work on serving so much as a team. We're constantly honing in on that, and it's all about staying cool and collective the whole time. If you overthink it, I know our coach tells us, Coach Jenny, that we have to have a routine, stuff like that, focus before every time we serve. So it's just all about staying cool and collective, focusing on a zone. Especially Coach Jason is always having us hit that zone perfectly. He'll say hit her left ear, and we have to hit her left ear. So it doesn't always have to be the hardest serve, but that's like the main focus, is that being technical in it is a lot better than hitting it as hard as we can or just trying to constantly score. Just those little details matter.
Your coach talked about a rut, you guys responding to a rut in form last year. How did you two respond to the adversity?
Yeah, it's hard. Kind of like she said, we came from a winning kind of streak coming from the AAC, then into the Big 12. We had a good first half of a run and of wins, and so to kind of hit that wall of that losing streak was tough. When you tend to win a lot, you kind of expect it at a certain point, and I think that's where we kind of struggled. And so we talk about it a lot. We kind of forgot how to win. And I think we didn't see that again until the end against Kansas, where we finally kind of broke out of that. And so I think that's what, as a team, we need to do, is just remember that we are a winning team and we can do that.
It's obviously never good to have adversity and stuff, but if we use it to our advantage, it can actually help us a lot in the future. I know that all of us personally have gone through adversity throughout our career, and that is why we are here today. That is why we're playing UCF Volleyball, because we have overcome that adversity throughout all of our individual careers and come together as one team, and so we were ready to attack it. We're ready to attack it this year too.
Sorry about that. For both of you, talk about some of your teammates that maybe the fans should be keeping an eye on this year that could make that jump, kind of like you did, Emily, last year, where people got to know you. Chloe, tell me about some of your teammates that you think will make a big impact.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have some freshmen coming in and transfers. Coach was talking about it earlier. Lex, obviously she's big and tall, 6'7", so you definitely won't miss her. I think that she's going to be great. She's going to add a lot of value and power to our offense and defense, blocking wise as well. So I think that's a big one. Obviously we have a good amount of returners as well, and there's going to be people taking on new roles that they didn't take last year and being on the court more than they were last year. And so I'm excited to see those players step up and take on those roles.
Yeah, I think everyone has their own personal roles that definitely help us as a team. We need every single person on the team, no matter what your role is. And I think someone to look out for sure is Sasha. We didn't see her at all really last year because she was a redshirt, obviously, but she's definitely an offensive and defensive weapon. But like I said, everyone on the team plays a role, whether it's A side, B side, whether we're cheering, whether we're on the court. Everyone matters for sure.
For both of you, what has it been like to see professional volleyball right next door? In addition, one of your teammates, Abby Hansen, was on the team, and of course, pro volleyball being what it is in the United States. What was it like to, while still in college, have the experience of seeing professional volleyball sort of play out like right next door?
Yeah, it's been super cool that we get to kind of host them here. I was able to work with the Valkyries, so I was in your position. I was interviewing the players, and so it was fun because I got to interview my old previous teammate. But it was amazing, seeing the people coming from being UCF volleyball fans and going out and supporting the Valkyries and seeing them at those games as well was super cool. And I think Orlando is a big kind of melting pot for sports. So yeah, it's been really cool, and they've kind of set the tone for our season and their next season's coming up.
Chloe, to be picked 11th, is that a slap to you guys? Do you feel like you're being penalized for the way the season went the last half last year, or how motivating is that?
Yeah, it's definitely motivating. I think that at the end of the day, it's a number on a screen or on a piece of paper, and we can't control that. That's somebody else choosing those numbers. So what we can do is put our best foot forward and try to prove them wrong. It's definitely I wouldn't say slap on the face, but kind of a kick in the butt to kind of get going. And you see that and you're like, okay, let's prove them wrong. And we talk a lot. We even talked about it today in our meeting of, okay, not proving somebody else wrong, but proving ourselves right. Like, we know where we come from, we know what we bring to the table, and putting that best foot forward.
Did you know before you went into the meeting? Did Coach tell you when you heard? Was it one of those, are you serious? Come on.
No, I'd seen it yesterday, I think, whenever it came out. I think we texted in the group chat, and we were like, okay, 11th, like, not a great spot to be at, but I think it builds that determination and the competition, and the fire kind of gets lit underneath all of us, and we want to do better.
Emily, what do you think?
I think it's really not how you start, it's how you finish. Seeing those numbers, not to put anyone else's success down for those other teams. Congratulations to them for making that. But I really do believe that we talked about this as a team as well, that it really matters how you finish. Those numbers don't mean anything unless you execute it towards the end. So, yeah.
Emily, having a year in the Big 12 under your belt, how much better prepared do you think you will be as a team going into year two, kind of knowing what to expect?
Having that year was definitely good for us because it opened our eyes a lot to the type of competition. And honestly, as a team, we've talked about it a lot. It's just so fun to be able to play at that level, constantly being challenged. So we're a lot better prepared this year. We're prepared to, we can't hit down. We can't let any ball drop. We have to give our full efforts all the time because no one's going to go easy on us this year. Although we were ranked 11, every single team in this conference is at the highest level, so we can't take any team lightly.
For both of you, last year you set single game attendance records, season ticket records, season average attendance records. As players playing in that venue, describe that environment, and did you notice that? Because it was packed almost every game. I think of the Texas game, et cetera. Describe that and being a part of that, helping build that interest here in this community.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Even from my freshman year, obviously I came in when it was the COVID season. So seeing the fans grow from that to now has been incredible. I remember vividly of the Texas match. We had one play where I think I had dove after a ball, then she went and got a stuff block, and it was like, I couldn't even hear my own teammates next to me because the crowd was so loud. And I just want to thank Knight Nation because they have been amazing, and the growth that you see within the sport, even in the Valkyries games and pro volleyball in general, has been great. And now with the Olympics coming around too, it's gotten even bigger. So thank you, Knight Nation. We love you, and we hope you guys keep coming to games.
It honestly feels like a dream. I just know that they make it so cool here. The environment is so awesome. It's uncomparable to any other university because it's like you're your own celebrity. Your team is your own celebrities in Orlando. And so I just feel like the atmosphere is so cool. When I first came here, I was like, this is home. This is unmatched to any other place, and I think we all feel it. And I love the support. I'm like, I don't know what we do to deserve it, but thank you so much for Knight Nation to constantly show up, constantly cheer. Even in those hard games and stuff, they're always there backing us. So yeah, it's definitely a super cool environment.
Last question.
That said, you are going to be away from that home for quite a while to begin the season with the home opener, not until September 19th. What sort of a challenge does that pose for you guys to start on the road for so long before that home opener?
Going on the road is always tough. It definitely is obviously a longer stretch of away games, but I think that's just going to build our drive to want to be home even more, and maybe kind of build up the Knight Nation of wanting to be there as well. But yeah, we go in one game at a time, home or away. We treat it the same, and then we'll bring it on back home to Orlando.
Yeah, we learn something from every single game that we play. So when we're on the road learning those things, we come back and we can use it to our advantage to take whatever that team is and give it our best and take those things that we learned. And in front of Knight Nation, it'll be pretty cool. So every game is just a learning process, and I don't think it's a disadvantage at all.
All right, that was Chloe Scheer and Emily Wilson. Let's kind of finish the thoughts on the back row there. You mentioned we expect Grimes and Chloe to be there on the back starters, but who are some other new faces or players to keep an eye on just in case there that you might see some action in the back?
Well, one new transfer that we actually haven't gotten a chance to, because there are two new liberos that are joining the roster this year. It's already clear, I think, that Coach Maurer is already planning for a post Scheer and Grimes world at this point. We have Sophia Katsovolos, who is a native of Tampa, Florida. She's transferring in from Gardner Webb. She ended up getting about 263 digs last season, 59 assists, and 11 aces. Now, just because she's a transfer, Megan Holland did that last year, and she ended up redshirting the 2023 season. So barring anything happening to Chloe and Caitlin, I could honestly see Kotsavolos potentially redshirting this year. But who knows? Maybe you might want to get her out in the court a little bit, get her used to playing with some of them. She's a transfer, so she certainly has the experience to do so. I think I would certainly trust her with being out there, but in the end, it really depends on what Coach Maurer is kind of planning for the long term. And then from then the other libero joining the roster is Cam Shelton, who is a Charlotte, North Carolina native from Ardrey Kell High School. She's actually the sister of a face that UCF has seen in the venue before. Eric, if you remember, in Oklahoma, I remember tweeting about this specifically. There was this one family in the stands in the venue who was actually wearing a half Oklahoma, half UCF shirt. That is the family of Cam Shelton right there, because her sister, Alexis, is actually an outside hitter on the Oklahoma team. So when I saw that, one of the new recruits was ended up having that, I'm like, man, it kind of stinks that Oklahoma's going to leave the Big 12, because it would have been really cool to see these two sisters get a chance to face each other. But considering how well Alexis did in that Oklahoma game, if Cam is able to bring back that same kind of level to the libero position for UCF, I think it could be very interesting to see what we'll be able to get. That being said, because she's a freshman, I think it's very likely that we see her redshirt, especially considering there are 3 liberos with college volleyball experience above her. But considering how much experience that she'll have to learn from this year, remember what happened with Abby Schomer. She got a redshirt year to learn under Amber Olsen, and she turned in an amazing redshirt freshman campaign. So while I don't think we'll see a lot of Cam Shelton on the court, I am very intrigued at the kind of player this program could potentially get from her.
Of course, we also heard from Emily Wilson, led the team in the offense last year, stepped in, as you heard Jenny Maurer earlier in the show, talk about big shoes to fill. You don't replace McKenna Melville. But Emily, I thought, was the big bright spot last year and took advantage of the opportunities that she had. I think another outside hitter to remember is Ava Armour, who I think was a talented freshman. Probably got, hit the freshman wall as the year went on. But what do you think of that, the outside hitters in the offense and where the points will come from? I think it will be very interesting, the rotation to follow there and that side of the from that standpoint.
I do. I am very interested to see what the outside hitters are going to bring to the table. Like I mentioned, Emily Wilson, she ended up having a serving renaissance last year. UCF was ranked 16th in the country, Eric, in aces per set, and 45th in the country in total team service aces, leading the Big 12 in both categories, by the way. And that is in large part because of, I would say, the renaissance that Emily Wilson has had in the aces department. So her serve game has been on point this past year. She really broke out in that department. Other players, I would imagine, would probably want to join her to kind of help keep that as part of a strong UCF group, and then just improve in other categories as well. UCF was actually 43rd in the nation last year in hitting percentage, which is a credit to Emily Wilson, alongside, I would argue, her biggest partner in crime, Ava Armour, who I know we said that Abby Schomer's had a very good debut season, but Ava Armour, let's not overshadow Ava, because I think for a freshman hitter, she also had herself quite a good season, putting in 226 kills, 31 aces, 147 digs, 37 blocks. She kind of reminds me of Anne-Marie Watson a little bit. Obviously, Watson had a lot more time to develop herself, but Ava kind of reminds me of her in the way that she's able to really do a lot at the outside hitter position. So I'll be interested to see what kind of player she'll develop into this time around, but they'll also have help in the form of Britt Carlson, who transferred in from Washington State. She ended up only playing in 12 matches starting 4 of them last year. But she, of course, having the experience playing at Washington State, it's a good depth piece to have, especially with Ava still being an underclassman. And then you have Heidi Bondi, who Coach mentioned in her press conference she was injured a lot of last year, so we didn't get a chance to see much at her, only playing in 9 matches. But I remember, Eric, seeing her a couple of years ago, and even though McKenna Melville was taking a lot of the time, Heidi Bondi was still kind of getting her licks in, and we were kind of waiting, when was that breakout going to come? And we thought it was going to happen after McKenna left. And of course, the first season without McKenna, she ends up getting injured. So I think now that I would argue that now that the outside hitters are maybe at their maybe full capacity again with Heidi now back in the frame. I think that this UCF team is going to be able to really slot anybody into that outside hitter position, and you couldn't really go wrong with it, which I think works with what Coach was saying about how you don't really replace McKenna Melville as with one singular player and just doing it with a whole bunch of different players. And I think if you combine the talents of all four of these outside hitters, then I think this is an offense that will be very interesting to watch unfold in this 2024 season.
Well, and I think it's more of a balance. I don't think this is a team that's set up to have one player dominate the scoring. You don't have a Melville, obviously, on this roster. But what you do have is some pieces that complement each other, some extra size. So I would imagine, I don't want to say it's by committee, Bryson, but I do think all those players you mentioned, I think will have to contribute offensively for this team to have success and be in the top half of the Big 12. I think it takes that much depth to have a shot in a deep Big 12 conference.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I would say if there's anybody that's leading this group, it's going to be Emily Wilson. She has been on the team, been on the team for a long time, just like Heidi has. The difference is that Emily has gotten a lot more court time. But when you look at the statistics from last year in the kills department, UCF was 105th in the nation, 8th in the Big 12 in kills per set, and 195th in the country and 10th in the Big 12 in total team kills, and 286th in the nation in total attacks. So this is a UCF team that, while they certainly did really well with their serves, once they got past that, it became a little bit more difficult in terms of scoring for them. And now it probably had something to do with the gauntlet that they had to face late in the year. But that being said, I think if you're Jenny Maurer and you look purely at the statistics, you really want to look at how are you able to maximize your scoring chances after the serve. And having depth like this is a really good way to do that, at least from a overall match standpoint.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting offensively how they look. I think don't be surprised too. Now a year under their full belt with a spring, right, under the same coaching staff. Maybe you see some different wrinkles, some different looks for this team moving forward as they continue to play with some of the big talented players that they have. So we'll see what happens with that. Couple things before we get into the schedule a little bit. We've been doing these Mount Rushmore little mini segments. We did them for both women's and men's soccer. Bryson, I want to pick your brain. Give me your Mount Rushmore of UCF volleyball. I will let you pick the position, or we can just go any position. Mount Rushmore, UCF volleyball.
I would say, how about we have like offense? We split it up into offense and defense, because I feel like if you split it up that way, you're able to bring up a few different players. I would say. What do you think?
Well, we can do that. We can actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's pick a couple of outside hitters. Let's just do a start. Forget Mount Rushmore. Let's scratch that, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do a starting five.
Oh, I like
starting five. Two outs, couple of outside hitters, a setter. All right, that's three. A middle blocker, and a defensive specialist or / libero.
All right. Yeah, I like the sound of it. Let's go with that. So if you're gonna go the outside hitter direction, I think there's really no the best choices to go with there are McKenna Melville and Renata Menchikova. I think those two, they're just a class above the rest in terms of the rest of UCF soccer history in terms of attacking. And both of them also have done quite a good job on the defensive front as well. McKenna Melville's 3rd in program history in digs, and Renata Menchikova is 7th. So I would say it has to be those two in terms of outside hitters. In terms of a blocker, that's going to be Tyra Turner, aka Tyra Harper. In terms of total blocks, she is way ahead of everybody else. Amory Watson is the one behind her at 586, and Watson, though, of course, is an attacker, is an outside hitter, so she wouldn't really be eligible in that sense. But Tyra Harper, I think, would be the person I would go with there. In terms of a libero, that's going to be Jordan. I think that's going to be Jordan Pingle. She leads the program in digs by a long shot, and then my last one. Let's see, because that's 4. I think my last one I'm going to throw in because I feel like we need somebody that's able to. The setter. That's Emily Kaiser. As much as I think Jenny Frank was an amazing setter. The difference between Frank and Kaiser, just in terms of their output, is honestly astonishing to me. It really is. So I honestly think you could make it a toss-up, maybe between Kaiser and Frank. But if I had to pick one of the two, I think I would go with Kaiser, purely from just the volume that she was able to do in the assist department. Plus, she was working with a murderer's row of UCF setters the entire time, with attackers with Renata Menchikova, Tyra Harper, Miriam Metzkes. I mean, she really knew how to quarterback that volleyball.
That's a good lineup. I don't disagree with any of the lineup. I'm going to pick a couple of different players just to be different and kind of give them some shine. Now, obviously, McKenna Melville, I'm with you. McKenna Melville would be in anybody's starting lineup unanimously. I'm going to go with Miriam Metzkes. I'm a little surprised you didn't go with Metzkes. I know it's a flip of a coin between her and Menchikova. I was expecting to go Menchikova, but you went ahead and picked her before me, so I decided I'm going to give some shine to Miriam Metzkes, who, as we've written in our top 100 rankings, you could argue was McKenna Melville before McKenna Melville.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I'm just saying that that if you're going with outside hitters from like an attacking standpoint, it's Renata Menchikova. But that being said, if you want I would say a right side hitter, because I feel like Metzkes and Renata would probably both slot into that right side because McKenna is gonna go left. So if you're going to go with a right side hitter that needs that combination of both offense and defense type of thing, then yeah, you would probably want to go with Metzkes in terms of that, because Metzkes is much better of a digger than Renata is.
Again, this is all nitpick. You're fine either way.
Just
like you're fine. I agree with Tyra being your middle blocker. I'll just pick somebody different just so we have something different. I'll go Delana Sarton, who just recently got inducted to the UCF Athletic Hall of Fame, helped get Todd Dagen and UCF Volleyball back to the NCAA tournament in 2014. Prior to that, they had not made the tournament since 2003. I bring that up because that's a good segue to my setter. Since you went with Kaiser, I will go with Jenny Frank, who was the star player on the 03 team that made the NCAA tournament there under Meg Fitzgerald as the head coach, part of 3 straight NCAA tournament appearances there. So I will go with Frank, and then I go with Sarton in the middle blocker, and then Frank is my setter.
It's honestly crazy when you look at these types of, I would say let's call it the all UCF volleyball team. I think that's a good way to put this. It's amazing to look at this and still see all the other really great players in program history that ended up not making the cut. Narissa Moravec, Emery Watson, Slayer Sante, Angelica Crump, Kia Bright. I mean, I would say that when we talk about the UCF Hall of Fame a lot, you and I honestly feel like out of there are a couple of programs that don't really have a lot of people in, but I would say in terms of the attention that the program has gotten in the past, if you compare the past attention versus the athletes that got in, I kind of feel like that UCF volleyball has some of the most underappreciated depth in terms of all-time great players on campus, I would say. Because this program hasn't been ignored, they haven't been ignored, because Renata Menchikova, Jenny Frank, they're in, and eventually McKenna Melville, I mean, she's got it. They're going to get, there's going to be a lot of, they're getting inducted. But in terms of people that kind of were missed or haven't gotten a chance to really get their due in terms of that, I kind of feel like UCF volleyball has been particularly overlooked for all-time great players in that regard.
Yeah, no doubt. And of course, I would have Jordan Pingle as my libero as well. A couple of notables, if he did it, just fill out the roster. Amber Olsen would probably make the roster if this was an all UCF volleyball all-time team, she would find somewhere to make we would find a way to make her fill in somewhere. But,
oh yeah, there's a lot of people to fill. Yeah, that's right. We talk about a starting five, but you can definitely have a ton of.
Well, we haven't even mentioned Laura Smith, who was the star player on the '78 team. She's in the Hall of Fame. She was a legend, a head coach, and a star player at UCF Volleyball. So those are some notables. Part of the great history of UCF Volleyball, which will get underway year 2 of the Big 12 season as members of the Big 12. But unique, Bryson, in that we're not going to see volleyball in person for a while in the regular season because they're going to start the season on the road.
Yes, they are. So they get their season started on the road August 31st against Virginia Tech, who finished 155th in the RPI last year, projected to finish 17th in the ACC. And we're not actually going to see them at home until September 19th. When they face Nevada for the first time for the UCF home non-conference tournament that UCF always has every year. This is a really interesting schedule, honestly. It's a little weird that it's to the point, Eric, where we're actually planning on going to because they actually play Stetson on September 5th. That's the first time that the team plays within driving distance. And so since it's going to be another roughly couple weeks before we see them again against Nevada, we're going to try to head up there for that Stetson game because we won't see him for almost a month or a little less than that. So I'll be very interested to see how this non-conference slate's going to play out. It's a little on the weaker side, a little bit, I would say. The biggest one I would say is FSU. They're ranked 20th in the coaches poll. They're finished last year with an RPI of 28. Of course, UCF did sweep the Seminoles in the venue last year, which is, I would argue, the biggest game of the year. But this time around, they got to go to Tallahassee and play on their home court. So that will certainly be, I would say, the major challenge of the non-conference slate. I think this is almost like last year in a way, where I think you really want to see the UCF rack up those victories in the non-conference slate, because it gives an indication of, I think, where the team is in terms of talent wise. That FSU game, I could see that maybe being a loss, but if you get maybe
Florida State team, by the way, it's in the preseason top 25, return a lot from last year.
Oh yeah, 20th, number 20 is what they were ranked. So you would want to see the program come out of non-conference with maybe, I would say, if you have more than one loss, then that would be somewhere that would maybe we would talk about that. But what I think, I'm not expecting them to go undefeated because FSU is there, but I would say if you get maybe more than 2 losses, then maybe we might need to talk a little bit. But then you go into the Big 12, and this is, I would say, at least a better Big 12 schedule than last year.
What's interesting, it's a Big 12 without Texas, which is a big one. The 2-time defending national champions are now in the SEC. Which I think makes an interesting question about the Big 12 and what the identity of the Big 12 from a volleyball standpoint will be without Texas, who has really been the flagship for that sport in the Big 12. Kansas is the preseason favorites. What's interesting, there's 4 teams in the Big 12 ranked in the preseason poll that just recently came out, but they're all ranked between 13 and 23, with Kansas being the highest ranked team, with BYU, as well as an Arizona State, the new member, ranked, and then Baylor. Kansas seems to be the favorite among the people that follow it closely. You look at where UCF starts; they start at Kansas, where their season ended last year in Lawrence for a big Wednesday night, September 25th. That is going to be on ESPNU, Bryson.
Yes, indeed. That's some great exposure for this volleyball team. And in a way, it sort of reminds me of the UCF men's basketball game against Kansas, in terms of this is a big splash to start the conference season. Unfortunately, UCF fans that don't travel will have to watch it on ESPNU. But I think it's a really great a really great test for this team, just because the stuff that you learn from that FSU game, I'm sure you'll be able to apply that just 10 days later for a matchup against Kansas. In terms of who is the favorite, though, I wouldn't count out BYU and Arizona State because when you look at the preseason poll in the Big 12 Conference, Kansas got 6 first-place votes, BYU got 4, and Arizona State got 3. So I wouldn't honestly – I would honestly say that that the Big 12 champion is going to end up coming from those 3 schools in terms of who people think it's going to be. I actually also wouldn't count out schools like Kansas State and Colorado. Both of them finished in the 60s RPI last year, so they're coming.
Kansas State was one of the first 4 out, I believe, last year. In fact, I was watching the 6 Rotations podcast. They do a really good job with my friend Daniel Gillum and former USC head coach Mick Haley. They were kind of breaking down the preseason top 25, and they both like Kansas State, actually. They think Kansas State's undervalued. And, if people talking to people in the coaches, they were talking to people in the Big 12, they said the toughest place to play is Manhattan at Kansas State. So
isn't that the outcome of doom?
For basketball, it is, and maybe it is for volleyball. I don't know, but I do know this. That's a tough start for UCF in that state of Kansas, going to Kansas and Kansas State. They do come home. UCF's picked 11th, by the way, in the Big 12, but there's 16 teams in the Big 12 this year. They host West Virginia. That's their home opener. Then they go to Cincinnati. You host Colorado, comes here. Iowa State, the Big 12 schedule. They did away with the back-to-back against the same opponent type of format.
We have enough teams to do that.
Iowa State's another team that's kind of receiving votes. They go to West Virginia. They host Kansas. So Kansas will come here for the first time in volleyball on October 19th for a rare Saturday afternoon game, Bryson. You don't see that often.
No, we don't.
And then Houston comes here October 25th. What's notable here, I'm loading the schedule list. They are honoring the 2014 UCF volleyball team. It's alumni night for the Houston game. October 25th, they're going to honor the 2014. It's the 10-year anniversary of the 2014 team. Makes me wonder if maybe they're going to be on the Ring of Honor, perhaps honored. Who knows? Houston's another team that's kind of undervalued. They're in the also receiving votes. I know they lost some personnel. They still got one of the best liberos in the country. Has been there 100 years in Georgia Titus. And we both are, I know we're fans of David Rear, the head coach, the job he's done at Houston. There. They host Cincinnati for Halloween. Get it there, Bryson? Halloween, which is the day before Halloween. They go to Texas Tech. They go to TCU, who's receiving votes. They go to Baylor, who's ranked 23rd. Baylor's got to replace some personnel. BYU comes here November 14th. BYU lost a lot from last year. I think there's some questions about BYU and that personnel. The bad news anyway, you think BYU will figure it out by November. UCF will then host Utah, host Kansas State for senior night. They host, and then here's an interesting little wrinkle in the schedule, Bryson. In between the Big 12 schedule, Saturday, November 23rd, UCF will go to Gainesville to take on number 11 ranked Florida.
Yeah, that is a very interesting little tweak to the schedule because I have not seen a non-conference volleyball match played this late in the season. I think it is a bit interesting because in terms of the type of program you get to play, because Florida starts this season 11th in the coaches poll, and they finished last year 20th in the RPI. They're projected to finish second in the SEC. I mean, I wouldn't say there's a gauntlet as last year. Maybe like it's not the same where it's like match after match after match after match, but you certainly do see in that like last, I would say, bit of the season, starting from like November 9th through like the last 3 weeks of the schedule, there is a higher concentration, I would say, of really highly valued programs coming into the picture. Baylor, BYU, Kansas State, Florida, Arizona State, you play all of those teams in the last 3 weeks of the season. Now, granted, it's not a back-to-back-to-back like the gauntlet is, but I think that it's almost in a way like UCF is kind of playing their tougher opponents later in the year, which we said back last year that, hey, if they have to go against this gauntlet of a schedule, at least it's late in the season so they can try and figure some stuff out. And I could see them doing that again this year. It's just the plus side of it all is that this time you don't have to at least have no rest in the middle of all of this. So I feel like we're not going to see like maybe the losing streaks of last year, but at the same time, I mean, this is still going to be a tough schedule, especially later on.
No doubt. Well, I mean, give Coach Maurer credit. Think about this: they're going to Florida State and Florida in the same year. She ain't ducking anybody in the state. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so, and Florida should be a lot better than they were last year. Remember, last year they had the injury to their star setter Stuckey, missed all of last year with a serious injury. Got missed or in the non-conference. They got a star outside hitter they got in the portal. So Florida should be in the mix there with Texas and Kentucky in the SEC. And you mentioned, ironically, Arizona State is who UCF finishes with. Kind of interesting. There'll be Thanksgiving around the state of Arizona. Can't any get farther than that. But I think the key is for this team to have success and protect their home court. It was just recently announced UCF season tickets sold out once again for volleyball. So the interest is still there, Bryson. That's a good sign that the support is still there for volleyball, which really has, across the nation, has kind of started to explode from an interest standpoint. More matches are on national television than ever before. There's going to be matches, in fact, in college volleyball this year on Fox and ABC in the regular season, which didn't happen before. And I think we're seeing that locally with UCF, really going back to the McKenna-Melville era. You talk about the legacy of the Melville era. I think it's the interest that it's grown in that building. It's a fun place to watch a match, great atmosphere. And I think UCF's got to protect their home court and then steal some road matches. That's the key in the Big 12, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. On the home court front, it's funny. Like, people say you don't really know what you have until it's gone. And what's interesting is that UCF is both starting and ending its regular season with some away streaks. Of course, you have this first, 3 weeks-ish away from home. We don't get a home match until September 19th. But then at the end of the season, UCF actually ends its season on a 3-game road trip, starting from that Florida game. And then they go out to the desert to play Arizona and Arizona State. So all of the home games for UCF volleyball are going to occur in just that 2-month span between September 19th and November 20th. So that's like a little more compact, I would say, in terms of in comparison to other seasons that this UCF volleyball program has had. But that being, like you talked about, that means that we're not going to get that back-to-back feeling that you get every time. So it's not like, you get used to each other after match 1, and then you have match two all over again. Now you have kind of that waiting game of, there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen between when you face an opponent once on the road and once at home. I feel like is this the first time since before the pandemic that this has happened?
The what?
The going back to not playing the people back to back.
No. I mean, the American, this was similar to what the American did the last couple of years that UCF was in it. It's interesting. They've come up with they're trying to figure out different ways in volleyball to try to limit the travel, but at the same time, try to be as fair of a schedule as possible. So it's a little tricky as the leagues keep growing and growing. So again, UCF was picked 11th, a little low. I think you and I feel like this team can pass that expectation. It's hard to say. I don't know if this is an NCAA tournament team or not because I don't know what the Big 12 will look like this year. I think that's one of the big storylines in college volleyball this year with the Big 10 getting stronger by adding USC, for example, and the UCLAs and Oregon. They're going to be a super conference. ACC added Stanford, for example. So it's hard to say with Texas going to the SEC along with Oklahoma. It's hard to say where the Big 12 lands. Can the Big 12 get as many teams in the tournament as they did last year? I don't know. But if you're UCF, if you're in the top 6 or 7 Big 12, you got a shot to make the tournament. I think that's really the goal. You want to be in the top 6, 7, have a shot. And maybe, like you said, what if you maybe upset Florida State and Tallahassee? That could be a nice resume win, kind of like what you had last year. UCF's RPI wasn't that bad last year. They just kind of ran into that long losing streak at the end. But again, I don't think this league will get dominated like it has been with Texas. And I think that's why everybody should feel optimistic if you're in the Big 12. We just don't know if they're going to get the same amount of teams into the tournament next year. But we'll see how these players grow. And again, another year together, I think a little bit more stabilized should help this team, I think, achieve some success, I think, this year. But again, they got to protect the home court, Bryson. Got to protect the home court because it's tough to win on the road.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Big 12 volleyball is almost reminding me a bit of women's soccer, soccer in a way, because it's not that it has its strengths. It does, but it feels a lot more wide open now without Texas in the way of it all. As far as UCF specifically, last season, UCF was able to beat expectations because they were projected to finish 9th in the conference, and they ended up finishing it tied for 8th. So they outdid their expectations for the season. And I feel like that's a very good, I would say, reasonable expectations for UCF fans to have going into this year. If we can outdo 11th place in the Big 12, then I will consider this season a relative success.
You want to see progress, right? You want to see progress. You want to see what Shomers and Armour in particular, as sophomores, take that next step. That could be the difference too. Some of these youngsters. So we'll see. It's going to be fun. It's going to be unique. It'll be on the road to start the year, but then they'll be at the venue. We'll have it all covered on blackandgoldbanneret.com throughout the season. Make sure you follow the YouTube channel. We'll have some post games there throughout the season, as well as on the blackandgoldbanneret.com for some recaps. Certainly follow us on the social media page, as well as on Instagram, on X, if you will, on that. Should be fun. Of course, we got soccer's going on. And of course, we'll have football getting underway at the same as well. We'll have you full coverage. We have the position previews up at blackandgoldbanneret.com, and we'll get you set. Football home opener against New Hampshire on Thursday. Bryson will be there, scheduled to be there with Kyle Nash. I will be back at home. We'll have a night shift post-game live reaction show, the original post-game show. I'll be there. I'll be joined by our buddy Jake Herrera, who'll be helping us on the football coverage on the road this year. More on that on that live show, and I'm sure we'll have a football preview podcast on these same podcast feeds this week as well. Bryson, this was fun. We've done it. We've done the women's soccer, men's soccer previews, and now volleyball. All now is left to do is just watch games and cover them.
Yeah, the day we're recording this is actually the day of week 0 college football starting, and so in a way, I know we've had a couple of soccer games so far, but now that college football has been thrown into the mix, we are really getting in to that fall sports atmosphere, I would say. So I'm excited to get going with adding another sport into the mix with volleyball.
No doubt about it. Should be a lot of fun, and we'll keep it here covered on blackandgoldbanneret.com. So for Bryson Turner, I'm Eric Lopez. We hope you've enjoyed this special edition of Night Shift as we preview the UCF volleyball season.